December 22, 1944, 1447 SS Oberg Group and Führer Sepp Dietrich stood by a map in his command post in Le Glaise and smiled. His 6th SS Panzer Army had advanced 60 kilometers deep into American defenses. In front of him lay reports of panic among enemy troops of entire divisions retreating in disorder. Americans are not soldiers, he told his chief of staff. They are merchants playing at war. When it comes to real battle, they run. 800 kilometers to the south in the town of Nancy, General George Patton looked at the same map, but his face showed not smugness, but cold fury. His Third Army was preparing for the most incredible maneuver in modern military history. In 48 hours, Patton told his commanders, "We will pivot the entire army 90 degrees and strike a blow the Germans will never forget." For days later, Dietrich was no longer smiling. His invincible SS army was encircled, and the Americans he had so despised were writing new rules of blitzkrieg. This is the story of how mockery turned into nightmare and how Hitler's greatest gamble became Patton's greatest triumph. On December 16, 1944, at 5:30 a.m., the silence of the Ardennes forests was shattered by the thunder of 1,000 guns. Operation VA Mr. Rain, Hitler's last desperate attempt to change the course of the war, had begun. 200,000 German soldiers, 600 tanks, 1,900 guns crashed down on an 80 kilometers front defended by just 4 American divisions. It was the largest German offensive on the Western Front since 1940. Hitler had chosen for his final strike the same place where 4 years earlier his armies had broken through to the Channel and crushed the French. The Ardennes, difficult terrain with dense forests and narrow roads, seemed the perfect place for a surprise attack. The American command considered this sector quiet and stationed its least experienced units here. The 106th Infantry Division had arrived at the front only 2 weeks earlier. The 28th Infantry Division was recovering from heavy fighting in the Herkin Forest. The first hours of the offensive seemed brilliant for the Germans. American units caught off guard retreated in panic. Entire battalions surrendered. On the first day, the Germans advanced 20 kilometers. In Berlin, euphoria reigned. Goebbels prepared a proclamation of a second Dunkirk. Wehrmacht generals who had been retreating for months suddenly believed in the possibility of victory. But in the Allied headquarters at Versailles, the atmosphere was entirely different. General Eisenhower realized the Germans had bet everything they had left. This was not a tactical diversion. It was a strategic gamble that could either prolong the war by a year or end it forever. And so Eisenhower made the boldest decision of his career. He called Patton. The plan for Operation Vakdien Rain was born in the German headquarters in the fall of 1944. Out of desperation and unrealistic hopes, Hitler, squeezed between the advancing Red Army in the east and the Allies in the west, sought a way to radically change the situation. On September 16, 1944, the Führer summoned Colonel General Alfred Jodl and announced a plan that shocked even this seasoned staff officer. German forces were to break through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse River, capture Antwerp, and split the Allied armies in half. "If we manage to take Antwerp," Hitler said, tracing his finger across the map, "the British and Americans will be divided. They'll have to make a separate peace with us, and then we can throw everything against the Bolsheviks." The plan looked grandiose on paper. 3 armies, the 5th and 6th SS Panzer Armies plus the 7th Army, were to cover 150 kilometers to Antwerp in just 4 days. For this, Hitler concentrated the Reich's last strategic reserves, 12 panzer divisions, including the most elite SS units. But Jodl and other generals saw obvious problems. The Germans lacked fuel. Each panzer division had ammunition and supplies for only 150 kilometers. The Luftwaffe could field at most 800 aircraft against 4,000 Allied. And most importantly, the Americans were no longer the inexperienced novices defeated at Kasserine in 1943. Field Marshal Georg von Rundstedt, nominal commander of the Western Front, called the operation a grand fantasy. Field Marshal Walter Model, who had to command the offensive directly, asked to scale it down, but Hitler was adamant. "This operation is our last chance," he said. Either we break the Allies now or we lose the war entirely. Preparation for the operation proceeded in strict secrecy. The code name Vochamrin, Watch on the Rhine, was intended to create the impression that the Germans were preparing for defense, not attack. Troop movements took place only at night. Radio communication was forbidden. Officers swore oaths of silence under threat of execution. By December 15th, the Germans had concentrated 200,000 men, 600 tanks and assault guns, 1,900 artillery pieces in the Ardennes. It was the largest concentration of German forces on the Western Front since the Normandy invasion. Facing them, the Americans had only 83,000 soldiers in 4 divisions. The U.S. command considered the Ardennes too difficult for large-scale operations. General Troy H. Middleton's 8th Corps held the sector with green and battered units. German officer Troy Führer von Freit described the mood in American trenches before the attack. The Yanks played cards, listened to jazz on the radio, and dreamed of Christmas at home. They had no idea what awaited them. On December 16, 1944, at 0530, German artillery opened the heaviest barrage on the Western Front since D-Day. 1,900 guns simultaneously rained fire on American positions along an 80 km front. Private James McNamara of the 99th Infantry Division later recalled, "I'd been in the infantry for 2 years, but I had never seen such hell. The ground jumped under our feet. Trees fell like matchsticks. It felt like the world was ending." But the artillery preparation lasted only 90 minutes. The Germans could not afford to expend more ammunition. They simply didn't have the reserves. At 0700, the infantry assault began, supported by tanks. The first blows fell on the 14th Cavalry Group and the 106th Infantry Division. These units were the least experienced in General Troy Middleton's 8th Corps. The 106th had arrived at the front only on December 11th and had not yet fully prepared positions. The German offensive followed the classic blitzkrieg pattern. Tanks infiltrated weak spots in the defense while infantry mopped up strong points left behind. The heaviest blows came from the 1st SS Panzer Division Lee Standard on the northern flank and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler Jugend in the center. By noon the situation for the Americans was critical. 2 regimental combat teams of the 106th Division, the 422nd and 423rd Infantry Regiments were encircled near the village of Schomberg. It was the largest American pocket since Patton. Colonel George Dashen, commander of the 422nd, tried to break out, but German tanks already controlled all the roads. At 16:30, he received an order from Division Command. "Hold positions at all costs. Help is on the way." But no help came. General Alan Jones, commander of the 106th, had lost contact with half his units. His headquarters in St. V turned into chaos. Telephones rang constantly. Couriers rushed in with conflicting reports and the situation map became a mosaic of red blotches. Meanwhile, German panzer units pushed deeper into American defenses. The battle group of SS Oberturmbannführer Joachim Peiper of the 1st SS Panzer Division advanced 25 kilometers and seized the village of Bullingen. Here occurred the first major tragedy of the battle. An American column medics and service troops ran into Peiper's tanks near Malmedy. 84 Americans surrendered, but Peiper's S-men executed the prisoners in a field. This event, remembered as the Malmedy Massacre, became a symbol of the brutality of the Ardennes battle. By the end of the day, the Germans had advanced 20 kilometers along the front. In American headquarters, confusion reigned. General Courtney Hodges, commander of the 1st Army, for the first time in the war, lost control of the situation. December the 17th was the darkest day for American forces in the Battle of the Ardennes. The German offensive spread like an oil stain, engulfing more and more territory. By noon, it became clear this was not a local diversion, but a full-scale offensive. At St. Vith, a key transport hub, the American defense was cracking. Major General Robert Hasbrouck, commander of the 7th Armored Division, received orders to move immediately to aid encircled units. But his division was scattered along a 30 kilometers front. I need at least 12 hours to concentrate my forces, Hasbro reported by radio. But I fear that in 12 hours there will be no one left to save. Indeed, the situation of the 422nd and 423rd Regiments was becoming hopeless. Surrounded in the forests near Schönberg, the American soldiers were starving and freezing. The Germans tightened the ring methodically using artillery and mortars. Private Elmer Clark of the 423rd Regiment wrote in his diary, "Third day in encirclement. No food, no ammunition. We can't evacuate the wounded. The Germans shouted us to surrender. Promise good treatment. The boys are starting to crack." On December 19th, the resistance of the 422nd and 423rd Regiments ended. 7,000 American soldiers surrendered. The largest capitulation of US forces in Europe. German propagandists immediately used the event to boost their troops' morale. But not all American units panicked. In the town of Bastogne, a vital road junction, the 101st Airborne Division prepared for siege. These paratroopers, veterans of Normandy and Operation Market Garden, had no intention of surrendering without a fight. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the division, received a German ultimatum. "Honor demands that you surrender to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." McAuliffe's reply became legendary. "Nuts." Meanwhile, German panzer divisions pressed forward. Piper's battle group reached the village of Stavalo, only 10 kilometers from a massive American fuel depot at Spa. Had the SS captured it, they would have had enough fuel to reach the Meuse. But here, the Germans met American ingenuity. Lieutenant Colonel David Peregril's engineer company rigged every bridge on Piper's route with explosives. When German tanks approached Stavalo, the Americans blew up the bridge over the Amblev River. Piper was trapped. Ahead, a destroyed bridge and American anti-tank guns. Behind, other US units already launching counterattacks. Ammunition and fuel were running out. "We are in a position where every hour may be our last," Piper noted in his war diary. "The Americans are proving much tougher opponents than we expected." By day end, it was clear the German advance was losing momentum. Heroic resistance by isolated American garrisons destroyed bridges, and fuel shortages were all slowing the German push. On December 19, 1944, at 10:30 a.m., the phone rang in the 3rd Army headquarters in Nancy. General George Patton picked up and heard the voice of the Supreme Commander. "George, the situation in the Ardennes is critical. I need your army." Eisenhower explained succinctly. The Germans had broken through 60 kilometers. 2 US divisions were destroyed. Bastogne was under siege. "How long will it take you to turn your army north?" he asked. 48 hours, Patton replied without hesitation. "Give me 48 hours and I'll attack." Eisenhower paused. What Patton was proposing seemed impossible. The Third Army was deployed eastward, preparing to cross the Sar River. Now, it had to pivot 90 degrees and march 150 kilometers north in the middle of winter on icy roads. Any other general would have asked for a week to regroup. Patton promised 48 hours. "All right," Eisenhower said. "Do it." Patton hung up the receiver and turned to his staff. Chief of Staff Major General Hugh Gaffey shook his head at the map. "Boss, it's impossible. We've got 133,000 men, 800 tanks, 500 guns. How can we move them in 2 days?" Gaffey Patton smiled. "You haven't yet seen what a real army can do. You're about to." For the next 2 hours, the Third Army headquarters buzzed with feverish activity. Planning officers drew up routes for hundreds of columns. Communications officers organized radio nets. Supply officers calculated fuel and ammunition needs. At 1 p.m., Patton gathered his division commanders. "Gentlemen," he said, "we face the toughest operation of the war. We must turn the entire army north and strike the Germans in 48 hours. Who thinks this is impossible?" No one raised a hand. The commanders of the Third Army knew their old blood and guts. When Patton made a promise, he kept it. Excellent, Patton continued. The 4th Armored Division moves to Arlon, the 26th Infantry to Luxembourg, the 80th Infantry to Merch. The march begins today at 1800. Questions? Major General Hugh Gaffey, commander of the 4th Armored, raised his hand. Sir, what about supplies? We'll be cutting ourselves off from bases. Supplies will come, Patton replied firmly. I've arranged with the French. They're giving us all their depots. Plus, Army aviation will drop ammo from the air. At 1800, Patton's Third Army began the fastest redeployment in modern military history. Across the frozen roads of France and Luxembourg. Moved hundreds of columns of tanks, guns, and trucks. 133,000 soldiers marched toward destiny. The night of December 20th was hellish for Patton soldiers. Temperatures dropped to -15 degrees Celsius and the roads became ice rinks. Hundreds of columns moved in darkness, guided only by blackout headlights. Sergeant Mike O'Connor of the 4th Armored Division later wrote to his wife, "We marched all night on frozen roads. Tanks skidded, trucks slid into ditches, but nobody stopped." Patton said 48 hours. So 48 hours it will be. The logistical challenge was staggering. The Third Army had 15,000 vehicles from tanks to field kitchens. All had to be moved 150 kilometers without losing combat effectiveness. Colonel Walter Mueller, head of the Army Movement Section, devised a detailed plan. Roads were divided into corridors. Armored divisions took the main highways, infantry the secondary roads, artillery and support units the back roads. Each column had a precise schedule. Tanks 25 km/h on highways, 15 km/h on dirt roads. Trucked infantry 30 km/h. Artillery on tractors 20 km/h stops only for refueling and maintenance. French Germs directed traffic at intersections. American military police controlled the main routes. Engineer battalions cleared snow and spread sand on icy stretches. But the greatest challenge was concealment. German air reconnaissance must not discover the Third Army's redeployment. So movement took place only at night with columns hiding in forests by day. On December 20th at 1400, the first units of the 4th Armored Division reached the area of Arlon. Only 30 kilometers from Bastogne. It was fantastically fast, 150 kilometers in 20 hours. Major General Gaffey immediately set up his command post and radioed Patton. "Sir, the vanguard is in place, ready for battle." "Excellent, Patton replied. "Now show the Germans what American speed really means." Meanwhile, the 26th Infantry Division of General Willard Paul reached positions near Luxembourg City. The 80th Infantry Division of General Horace McBride assembled in the MCH area. In 36 hours, Patton had moved 133,000 men and 15,000 vehicles. It was the fastest strategic redeployment of an army in all of World War II. German command had no idea that an entire army was approaching from the south. But Patton had no intention of stopping. On December 21st at 0600, he gave the order. "We attack today. No artillery preparation, no probing attacks, just forward and tear their guts out." The Third Army prepared for the boldest counterattack in its history. On December 22, 1944, at 6:00 a.m., the silence of the Ardennes morning was broken by the roar of tank engines. Patton's 4th Armored Division of the Third Army launched a counterattack from the south against German positions. Major General Hugh Gaffey deployed his division in classic formation. Tank battalions in front, motorized infantry on half-tracks behind them. Self-propelled artillery on the flanks. 160 Sherman tanks and 80 self-propelled guns pushed northward. The Germans were caught completely off guard. SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich, who only yesterday had mocked the American shopkeepers, now frantically tried to shift reserves to meet the new threat. Where did they get an entire army? He shouted over the radio to his chief of staff. 3 days ago, they were running in panic and now they're attacking with 3 divisions at once. The first clash took place near the village of Martellange. The German 5th Parachute Regiment had dug in among stone houses and prepared to repel a frontal assault. But the Americans attacked differently than the Fehler Jagger expected. Instead of striking head-on, Sherman tanks split into small groups and encircled the village from 3 directions simultaneously. Self-propelled M7 Priest howitzers fired direct rounds into buildings, while infantry advanced under cover of smoke screens. Within 2 hours, Martellange was liberated. German losses: 340 killed and wounded, 180 captured. American losses: 23 killed and 67 wounded. The casualty ratio spoke for itself, but the greatest effect was psychological. German soldiers who only yesterday had felt like victors suddenly realized they were the ones being attacked. An attack so quickly and decisively that resistance seemed futile. SS Unterführer Heinrich Schultz of the 12th SS Panzer Division wrote in his diary, "The Americans attack like madmen. Their tanks are everywhere. In front, on the flanks, behind. It seems they have endless reserves. We have only what remains after 5 days of assault." By noon, the 4th Armored Division had advanced 8 kilometers and reached the approaches to Bastogne. Here, the Americans faced heavy resistance. The Germans rushed in the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and the 5th Parachute Division. The fiercest battle of the counterattack began. German Panthers and Tigers clashed with American Shermans in open terrain. Technically, the German tanks were superior, but the Americans had the advantage in numbers, and most importantly, logistics. When a German tank was knocked out, its crew often had nowhere to retreat. When an American Sherman was lost, another rolled forward within an hour. Patent supplies of fuel and ammunition seemed inexhaustible. Captain James Leon, a tank company commander, recalled, "We lost 12 tanks in 1 day, but by evening we received 15 replacements. The Germans lost 8 and got none. The arithmetic of war was on our side." By the end of December 22nd, the German ring around Bastogne was pierced from the south. The 4th Armored Division established a narrow corridor to the besieged stronghold. The 101st Airborne Division was saved. December 23rd brought a change in the weather that completely shifted the balance of power. The fog lifted, the sky cleared, and American air power could finally enter the battle. At 0830, the first P-47 Thunderbolts appeared over the battlefield. Each heavy fighter bomber carried 10 HVAR rockets and 500-pound bombs. German armored columns stood out as easy targets against the snow-covered fields. Major Robert S. Johnson, ace of the 56th Fighter Group, led the first strike. We saw the perfect picture beneath us. German tanks and trucks strung out along the road for Kilome. It was like a shooting gallery. On the first day of air operations, the Germans lost 89 tanks and assault guns, plus over 200 vehicles and tractors. It was a blow from which the panzer divisions never recovered. But on the ground, the fighting only intensified. Encouraged by the success at Bastogne, Patton ordered the offensive expanded. The 26th Infantry Division attacked toward Wiltz while the 80th Infantry pushed on Edelbruck. The fiercest battle erupted for the town of Diekier. This small Luxembourgish town became the key to the entire German position in the southern sector of the Bulge. Whoever held Dieck controlled the main communications of the German force. The Germans pulled in the 352nd Infantry Division and remnants of the 276th Infantry Division. Defense was commanded by experienced Colonel Erich Schmidt, a veteran of the Eastern Front. "This town is the key to our southern flank," Schmidt told his men. "If the Americans take it, the whole 7th Army risks encirclement." The attack on Dieck was led by Colonel Harry Flanagan of the 80th Infantry Division. His plan was simple but effective. Diversionary attacks from the west and east with the main strike from the north where the Germans least expected it. The battle began at 0500 on December 24th. American 105mm howitzers shelled German positions for an hour, after which 3 infantry battalions advanced with tank support. The Germans resisted desperately. Every house became a fortress, every street a defensive line. The Americans fought house by house, room by room. Sergeant Frank Peterson of the 317th Infantry Regiment recalled, "It was like hell. The Germans sat in cellars with machine guns and Panzerfausts. Any room could be your last. But we pushed forward because we knew Patton was behind us." By the end of the day, the Americans held half the town. The Germans fell back to the center and entrenched themselves in a 14th century stone church. From there, they continued firing on US troops. Flanagan called for reinforcements. A battery of 155mm howitzers. 2 direct hits reduced the ancient church to rubble. German resistance collapsed. On Christmas Day, December 25th, Diak was fully liberated. The southern flank of the German Bulge began to crumble. December 25, 1944 entered history as the Christmas miracle of Patton's Third Army. On the day when all of Christian Europe celebrated the birth of Christ. And American soldiers received the best gift, the chance to win. At 6:00 a.m., Patton personally arrived at the forward command post of the 4th Armored Division near Bastogne. He wanted to assess the situation himself and plan the next phase of the counterattack. "Gentlemen," he told his commanders, "the Germans have given us the best Christmas present. They poured out of their fortifications and let themselves be destroyed in the open field. Now it's our turn to hand out gifts." The situation truly favored the Americans. In 4 days of counterattacks, the Third Army had advanced 20 kilometers, liberated Bastogne, and captured key towns. Most importantly, the German initiative was gone for good. SS Oberg Group in Führer, who a week earlier had dreamed of a second Dunkirk, now feverishly looked for ways to save his divisions from destruction. His 6th SS Panzer Army had lost half its tanks and a third of its manpower. "The Americans no longer fight the way they used to," he reported to Hitler. "They've become faster, bolder, more ruthless. Their patent has outplayed us all." Indeed, Patton's tactics were radically different from the traditional American approach. Instead of slow preparation and cautious advances, he chose speed and aggression. His tanks struck where least expected. His infantry never paused to consolidate lines. "Speed is everything," Patton repeated. "While the Germans think, we act. While they regroup, we attack. They're playing at war. We're winning it." On December 26th, the Third Army launched a new stage of the offensive. The goal was no longer just to relieve Bastogne, but to encircle and annihilate the entire southern part of the German Bulge. The 4th Armored Division struck northeast, aiming to cut the Bastogne-Falls Road. The 26th Infantry Division advanced on Wiltz. The 80th Infantry cleared the remaining German resistance in Luxembourg. The fiercest fighting erupted over the village of Sieber, turned into a strong point by the Germans. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division had turned every farmhouse into a bunker, every barn into a firing position. But the Americans found an unorthodox solution. Instead of a frontal assault, Cullen Rayton Abrams, commander of the 37th Tank Battalion, ordered his Shermans to attack at night with headlights on. "The Germans expect tanks to attack in daylight," Abrams explained. "A night assault with lights will stun them." The gamble worked brilliantly. German anti-tank gunners, blinded by tank beams, couldn't aim. Infantry panicked and abandoned positions. Within 3 hours, CBRE was captured. By the end of December, the German Bulge had turned into a bag. From 3 sides, it was being squeezed by American and British forces. Retreat routes were cut off by artillery and aircraft. On December 27th, confusion bordering on panic reigned in German headquarters. What had seemed a triumphant advance a week earlier was now a catastrophe. Field Marshal Walter Model, commander of Army Group B, convened an emergency meeting at his headquarters in Zwie. Reports from division commanders painted a grim picture. Colonel Otto Skorzeny, commander of the 150th Panzer Brigade. "My unit has lost 60% of its equipment. The Americans attack so fast we can't maneuver. Major General Siegfried Rausch of the 5th Parachute Division. My division is scattered. Regiments have no contact with each other. American artillery fires around the clock. Lieutenant General Fritz Berlin of Panzer Lehr Division. I have 18 tanks left out of 80. Fuel for 1 day. Ammunition for half a day. Model listened with a stony face. The virtuoso tactician who had held back the Red Army for 2 years now stood powerless before the American onslaught. The problem isn't that the Americans got better, he told his chief of staff. The problem is that we got worse. Our soldiers are exhausted, our equipment worn, and we have no reserves. Indeed, the divisions taking part in the offensive were shadows of the Wehrmacht's past glory. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend was manned by boys of 16 to 17. The 276th Infantry Division was filled with 40 to 50-year-old reservists. Even the elite 1st SS Panzer Division suffered from a shortage of experienced officers. Meanwhile, Patton prepared the final blow. On December 28, he summoned his corps commanders and unveiled Operation Thunderbolt. "Gentlemen," he said, "the Germans are stuck in the Ardennes like a fly in a web. Time to shut the trap for good." The plan was daring and risky. The Third Army would swing northwest and link with Had's First Army advancing from the north. This would form a pocket trapping 3 German armies. But to do so, they had to cover another 40 kilometers through difficult terrain against desperate German defense. All in the dead of winter with temperatures plunging to -20 degrees Celsius. "Sir," said Major General Eddy, commander of Tizian Corps, "what if the Germans manage to retreat?" "They won't," Patton smiled. "Hitler won't let them. He'll order them to hold to the last, and that will be his last mistake." On December 29, Operation Thunderbolt began. 3 corps of the 3rd Army struck northwest. The 4th Armored pushed toward Bastogne. The 6th Armored attacked Warden. The 11th Armored advanced on Hules. German resistance was desperate but disorganized. Their scattered divisions couldn't support one another. The Americans used their mobility, striking where the enemy was weakest. By the end of the day, the Bulge had shrunk by another 15 kilometers. German losses, over 8,000 men and 150 tanks. American losses, 890 men and 23 tanks. On January 1, 1945, Patton received an intelligence report that intrigued him. The Germans had deployed a battalion of heavy tanks, 14 King Tigers, the most powerful tanks in the world. These 70-ton monsters, armed with an 88mm gun, were practically invulnerable to standard American tanks. A single King Tiger could wipe out an entire company of Shermans without taking damage. "Interesting," Patton said to his intelligence chief. "So, the Germans want to test their toys against us. Let's see how that works out." On January 2, the King Tigers of the 5001st SS Heavy Tank Battalion entered combat near the village of Nonmit. Opposing them was the 8th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division, 17 Shermans under Lieutenant Colonel Jenk Richardson. On paper, it looked like David versus Goliath. The Sherman weighed 32 tons and mounted a 76mm gun effective against a King Tiger only at less than 500 m. The King Tiger could kill a Sherman at 2000 m. But Richardson was a veteran of the African campaign. He knew in tank battles, the winner is not the one with the better tank, but the one with the better tactics. "Listen carefully," he told his crews over the radio. "We won't fight them head-on. We'll hunt like wolves in a pack, fast, unexpected." Richardson split his battalion into 4 groups of 4 tanks each. One group would draw German fire with a frontal demonstration. The 2nd and 3rd would flank. The 4th would strike from the rear. The battle began at 14:30. The German Tigers, positioned on a hill, methodically destroyed American tanks. In 5 minutes, they knocked out 3 Shermans without loss. But then the American tactic worked. While the Germans focused on the frontal group, the flanking group struck their weaker side armor. The side armor was far less resistant than the thick frontal plate. The result stunned even the Americans. In 40 minutes, they destroyed 8 King Tigers while losing 6 Shermans. The cost ratio was staggering. 1 King Tiger was worth 5 Shermans. Most importantly, it was a crushing psychological blow. The Germans' most powerful weapon was not invincible after all. The Americans proved that even technical superiority doesn't save you if the enemy outthinks you. SS Oberturmbannführer Johann Puffer, commander of the 5001st Battalion, radioed. The Americans fight completely differently now. They are smarter, faster, bolder. Our Tigers were beaten not by machines, but by tactics. On January 3rd, Patton personally inspected the wrecks. Walking among the smoldering hulks of King Tigers, he uttered the phrase that became famous. It doesn't matter how big and powerful your tank is. What matters is who sits inside. On January 8, 1945, Hitler finally made the hardest decision of his military career. He authorized a retreat from the Ardennes. 22 days of bloody fighting had shown that Germany's last gamble had failed. But the German retreat was no less dramatic than the offensive. Under constant attacks by American aircraft and artillery, trudging along icy roads. Abandoning equipment and severely wounded men, 3 German armies struggled back toward the Siegfried Line. Patton had no intention of letting the Germans withdraw peacefully. They came as uninvited guests, he said. Now let them pay for it. On January 9 through 10, the Third Army struck at retreating German columns. American aircraft operated day and night, turning German marches into bloody nightmares. Major Guard Angel of the 12th SS Panzer Division wrote in his diary, "This isn't a retreat. It's a rout. Wrecked vehicles everywhere. Bodies everywhere. American planes hunt us like rabbits. Discipline is collapsing." On January 16, the spearheads of the US 3rd and 1st Armies met near Hugh Falls. The Bulge was eliminated. The Battle of the Ardennes ended in complete Allied victory. The results were catastrophic for Germany. The Wehrmacht lost 67,000 men killed, wounded, or captured, 700 tanks and assault guns, and 1,600 aircraft. These had been the Reich's last strategic reserves. American losses were 19,000 men and 733 tanks. But unlike the Germans, the US could replace such losses in a matter of weeks. Field Marshal Rundstedt, assessing the outcome of the battle, uttered the phrase that became the epitaph of the Third Reich. "After the Ardennes, we have no resources left for strategic operations. From now on, we can only retreat and await the end." But the worst blow for Germany was not material, but moral. Their final attempt to change the course of the war had collapsed with a crash. Wehrmacht soldiers who in December still believed in possible victory now knew the war was lost for good. Patton, by contrast, was at the peak of glory. In 26 days of fighting, his Third Army had marched 150 kilometers, destroyed 4 German divisions, and liberated dozens of towns. On January 16, Eisenhower personally visited the Third Army headquarters to congratulate Patton. "George," he said, "what you did in the Ardennes will go down in history as one of the greatest feats of the US Armed Forces." When the Battle of the Ardennes ended, it was time to take stock and analyze the mistakes. Why did Germany's last gamble fail so catastrophically? Why were armies that had once triumphed on every front now powerless against the Americans? The chief error of German command was underestimating the enemy. The Wehrmacht, accustomed to victories from 1939 through 1942, failed to realize that the US Army of 1944 was fundamentally different from the novices of 1942 through 43. Major General Kenneth Strong, Eisenhower's chief intelligence officer, conducted a detailed analysis of German planning for Operation Buckminster. His conclusions were striking. The Germans planned this operation using the logic of 1940. They expected the Americans to panic and retreat like the French had for years earlier. But the Americans of 1944 were entirely different soldiers. Indeed, in 2.5 years of war, the US Army had developed enormously. Officers had gained experience in Africa, Italy, and Normandy. Soldiers had learned to fight as well as the Germans. American technology and logistics had reached unmatched levels of efficiency. The Germans also underestimated the nature of the Americans themselves. Unlike Europeans, long accustomed to rigid hierarchy, Americans were used to initiative and independence. When a commander was killed, a sergeant took command. When the sergeant fell, a private stepped up. This trait proved decisive in the chaos of the Ardennes. German soldiers cut off from their command often lost the will to fight. Americans in the same situation only fought harder. American technological superiority also played a crucial role. By 1944, US industry was at its peak. A lost tank could be replaced within hours, a down plane within a day, a fallen pilot within a week. The Germans, in contrast, were fighting at the limits of their resources. Each Tiger tank lost was irreplaceable. Each Me-262 shot down was a catastrophe. Experienced pilots and tank crews were worth their weight in gold. But Hitler's greatest mistake was his strategic delusion. He planned the Ardennes offensive as a turning point that would force the Western Allies into a separate peace with Germany. This was pure illusion. By the end of 1944, the Allies already saw the end of the war approaching and were preparing for post-war settlements. No tactical setback could persuade them to compromise with the Nazi regime. General Omar Bradley, a commander of the US 12th Army Group, put it bluntly: Hitler lived in a world of illusions. He thought we were like the French in 1940. But we didn't come for glory or territory. We came to destroy Nazism forever. The Germans also miscalculated the psychological factor. The Malmedy massacre, where SS troops executed American prisoners, only hardened Allied resolve. Instead of fear and hesitation, it gave the Americans new motivation to fight to the finish. Sergeant Kurt von Alt of the 285th Infantry Regiment wrote in his diary, "When we heard about Malmedy, the mood in the companies changed overnight. Before we saw the Germans as ordinary soldiers following orders. Now we saw them as murderers who had to be destroyed." Operation Vok Mr. Rain revealed another fatal weakness of German strategy: total dependence on the Führer himself. Hitler personally planned the operation, personally appointed commanders, and personally forbade retreat. Even when situations became hopeless, a system built on the cult of one man proved fatally fragile. When the Führer's decisions were wrong, they could not be corrected. No one dared oppose the greatest commander of all time. The American command system, in contrast, rested on collegiality and professionalism. Eisenhower consulted his subordinates. Patton listened to his staff. Division commanders had freedom of initiative. The result was inevitable. A flexible American system defeated a rigid German hierarchy. To fully grasp the scale of the American victory in the Ardennes, it's worth analyzing in detail what Patton achieved with his Third Army. Military historians regard this operation as one of the greatest examples of operational art in the 20th century. First, Patton demonstrated unmatched speed of reaction. From Eisenhower's phone call to the launch of the attack, only 72 hours passed. In that time, the Third Army pivoted its entire front by 90 degrees and marched 150 kilometers. For comparison, the Germans needed at least a week to redeploy a single army, and the Soviets about 10 days. Patton did it in 3. The secret lay in extraordinary logistical organization. Colonel Walter Mueller, chief of movement for the Third Army, designed a system that allowed massive troop movements with minimal traffic jams or delays. Each division had a detailed march route time to the minute. Each column knew where and when to refuel. Every commander had clear contingency instructions. Logistics is the art of the possible, Mueller said. And we made the impossible possible. Second, Patton showed mastery in the tactical use of different arms. His armored divisions acted not as blunt iron fists, but as surgical scalpels, slicing through German defenses at their weakest points. Instead of frontal assaults, Patton used flanking maneuvers. Instead of long artillery barrages, he relied on sudden strikes supported by attack aircraft. Instead of cautious advances, he launched rapid breakthroughs with immediate exploitation. Patton fought outside the rules, said Lieutenant General Fritz Berlin, commander of Panzer Division. When we expected him to strike from the front, he hit from the flank. When we prepared for a flank attack, he struck from the rear. Third, Patton displayed unique ability to exert psychological pressure on the enemy. His Third Army didn't just advance. It created an atmosphere of inevitable German defeat. Fast breakthroughs, sweeping flanks, sudden blows to the rear. All of it eroded German confidence. Many units surrendered before firing a shot. Patton didn't just fight our soldiers, Field Marshal Model later wrote in his memoirs. He fought our spirit. And in that fight, we lost. Fourth, the American general showed rare talent in coordinating multiple armies. The Ardennes counterattack required close cooperation between Patton's Third Army, Had's First Army, and Simpson's Ninth Army. Patton didn't merely execute his assigned role. He actively shaped the actions of neighboring forces. His initiative spurred other commanders to act, creating an avalanche effect. Patton wasn't just an army commander, Eisenhower assessed. He was a catalyst that accelerated everything around him. Finally, Patton revealed an uncommon instinct for seizing the initiative in the harshest conditions. When the Germans attacked in the Ardennes, most American commanders thought of defense. Patton immediately began planning a counterattack. This mindset, always seeking opportunities to strike, made Patton a unique military leader. He didn't react to the enemy's moves. He forced the enemy to react to his. The Battle of the Ardennes ended nearly 80 years ago, yet its lessons remain relevant today. The operation stands both as a textbook on how not to plan strategic offensives and as a model for how to respond to crisis. Lesson 1: Underestimating the enemy always leads to disaster. German planners based Operation Bark in our Reign on outdated views of the US Army, ignoring how much it had changed in 2 years of war. Modern conflicts prove this lesson still holds. Armies that fail to adapt to new realities are doomed, no matter their past victories. Lesson 2: Speed of reaction in a crisis often matters more than perfect planning. Patton lacked time for meticulous preparation, but he had decisiveness and improvisation. In today's even faster wars, battlefield conditions can change in hours. Commanders who waste time on bureaucracy will lose to those who act quickly and boldly. Lesson 3: The psychological factor is as vital as material strength. The Germans had enough force for success in the Ardennes, but after their first setbacks, they lost faith. The Americans, even in their darkest hour, kept confidence. That resilience let them withstand the blow and seized the initiative. Lesson 4: A flexible command system is essential. Germany's rigid hierarchy with Hitler making every decision failed in a dynamic situation. The American system built on delegated authority. An initiative let commanders adapt quickly. Lesson 5: Logistics is critical. The German offensive collapsed largely due to lack of fuel and ammunition. The Americans, by contrast, had virtually unlimited supplies. In modern conflicts, supply chains are even more complex. An army that can't sustain itself will lose regardless of soldiers' heroism. Lesson 6: Technological superiority matters. By 1944, US Bundesliga advantage lay not only in weapon quality but in mass production and effective use. Lesson 7: Strategic maturity of leadership is decisive. The Americans saw war as more than battles. It was about destroying Nazi ideology. This vision allowed them to maintain coalition unity even in crisis and fight through to victory. The Ardennes was Germany's last great attempt to alter the war's course. Its failure meant the fate of the Third Reich was sealed. The road to Berlin lay open. When the last fighting in the Ardennes ended in January 1945, it was clear the world had changed forever. The operation that was supposed to bring Germany a second Dunkirk had become its final disaster. The irony was that German mockery of the Americans became the catalyst for their own defeat. Contempt for the enemy, belief in their own superiority, dismissal of American capabilities. All this led to strategic blindness. On December 16, 1944, SS Obergruppe and Führer Zepp Dietrich had real reason for optimism. His divisions broke through American defenses. Thousands of enemy soldiers surrendered and the road to Antwerp seemed open. But by December 22, that same Dietrich was desperately trying to save what remained of his army. Thus, American merchants had proved such formidable warriors that even elite SS units could not withstand them. What had happened in those 6 days? How did an army retreating in panic seize the initiative and strike a devastating counterblow? The answer: the Germans fought against outdated perceptions, not reality. Their image of the US Army was 2 years out of date. In that time, the Americans had gone from raw novices to professional soldiers. More importantly, the Americans proved a principle in modern war. Victory goes not to those with the proudest traditions, but to those who adapt fastest to new conditions. The German army, burdened with immense historical experience, proved too conservative. The American army, free of dogma and stereotypes, developed new approaches to combat. Patton became the symbol of this new American philosophy of war. His Third Army fought not by academy cannon, but by the logic of effectiveness. The goal was results, not adherence to tradition. "I'm not fighting German generals," Patton said. "I'm fighting German soldiers, and my soldiers are better than theirs." This philosophy proved victorious. In 3 weeks of fighting in the Ardennes, the Americans not only repelled the German offensive, they showcased a new model of warfare that became the standard for future conflicts. Speed, flexibility, technological superiority, mastery of logistics, and psychological impact on the enemy. All these elements were united for the first time in one system in the Ardennes. The Germans, by contrast, revealed the danger of clinging to past glories. Blitzkrieg, so effective in 1939 through 41, failed against an enemy that had learned how to counter it. Operation Vok Mr. Rain became the swan song of the old European school of war. After the Ardennes, it was clear the future belonged to those who changed quickly and dared to experiment. The American victory in the Ardennes had immense symbolic weight. It proved to the world that the United States was not only an industrial giant, but also a great military power. The European balance of power was changed forever. The era when Europe's armies decided the continent's fate had ended. The American era had begun, and it continues still. The Battle of the Ardennes ended nearly 8 decades ago. Yet, its echo still resounds. It was not merely a military victory, but a symbol of an epochal shift, the transition from the old world to the new. On the morning of December 16, 1944, when German guns thundered through the Ardennes forest, few could have foreseen that this operation would be Europe's last bid to keep its dominance. Germany, heir to centuries of military tradition, wagered everything it had left. Facing it stood the young American army, a force from a country that only 40 years earlier had fought native tribes, but now laid claim to global leadership. The result shocked everyone, including the Americans themselves. In 26 days of combat, it became clear. The future belonged not to those with the longest history, but to those who learned and adapted fastest. Patton and his soldiers revealed a new understanding of war. For them, war was not an art, but a technology. Not ritual, but process, not a display of national spirits, but a means to achieve concrete goals. This pragmatic philosophy proved stronger than romantic visions of glory. The Americans fought not to prove superiority, but to finish the war quickly and go home. Paradoxically, that unpoetic motivation made them unstoppable. While Germans dreamed of grand victories, Americans methodically dismantled the German war machine piece by piece. German jokes about American merchants turned out prophetic in an unexpected way. The Americans did approach war like merchants with calculation, planning, attention to detail, and a drive for maximum efficiency. The result speaks for itself. The merchants crushed the warriors. Technology beat tradition. The future outplayed the past. The Battle of the Ardennes became a moment of truth for Western civilization. It showed leadership passing from the old world to the new. From Europe to America, from aristocracy to democracy. This transition was inevitable. But in the Ardennes, it found dramatic completion. When the last German tanks rolled back toward the Siegfried Line, an entire era rolled back with them. A new era had begun, the American era. The age when world politics was shaped by a nation whose soldiers only yesterday seemed to Europeans like untested amateurs. The irony was that the Germans themselves hastened the process. Their Operation VA Mine was meant to restore German leadership in Europe. Instead, it handed that leadership to America forever. Looking back at those dramatic days of winter, 1944–45. One sees that the Ardennes determined not just the outcome of World War II, but the shape of the century that followed. Patton and his men did more than defeat the German army. They unveiled a new way of thinking, a new culture of warfare, a new method of solving global problems. That legacy endures today. Modern conflicts still echo the principles first applied by Americans in the Ardennes. Speed, technological edge, logistical precision. Psychological impact. The Battle of the Ardennes changed the face of war forever. And that is its enduring lesson. Was this lesson good for humanity? History has yet to answer, but one thing is beyond doubt. In December 1944, in the Ardennes forests, a new world was born. A world we still live in today.